And welcome to Revolving Culture, the podcast about the culture that revolves. We are here again. Thank you so much for joining us. This week we are going to be talking about the evolution of leisure. Let's go around. It's been a while since we've all five been at the table together, so let's remind everybody who everybody is. I'm Marty.
I'm Robbie. I'm Andrew.
I'm Jeremy.
And I'm Vicky.
And as I said, we are Revolving Culture, and we are talking about the evolution of leisure. It's a topic that's got a lot of breadth and depth in it, so we'll probably just jump right in. Really, when we start talking about the evolution of leisure, I think we kind of have to address the fact that in its earliest, maybe is not the right word, but in the earlier incarnations, the people that traditionally had the time to spend in leisure activities were the sort of privileged class, the upper 1%. That division was very much an upstairs, downstairs kind of phenomenon. The working classes, as a general rule, they were working to provide the leisure tools for which the upper class used to enjoy their abundant leisure time. Did anybody really come across any really interesting historical facts about the early evolution of leisure, how people spent their spare time?
In ancient Greece, they did bullfighting. Ancient Greece and ancient Rome, a couple of things that I found were because of how quickly they were able to prosper, and the cities that they were able to build. They built libraries, they built parks like with manicured lawns. They were amongst the first to introduce organized sports. And the Olympics, were born of that.
It's interesting that when you're talking about the sporting arenas and stuff like that in ancient Rome, at the point where ancient Rome stops being pagan and becomes Christian, whereas at the point where we have the first Christian Roman emperor, the aristocratic Roman resisted Christianity as a general rule when it was originally formed, because one of the tenets, especially in early Christianity, was humility, being humble,
piety,
and how important people in the Roman Empire proved they were important was you built a fountain, you built a Colosseum, you built a library that had your name on it, and to then be told, no, that's crass, that's egotistical, that's prideful, that's bad. They really pushed back against that, because that was, to them, that was how you cemented your family's importance to history. I built that library. We put that Colosseum in our town. And like the Roman Colosseum, that was, when you see it now, you think, and when a lot of people think about it now, it's just, gladiator games or Christians and Lions, Spartacus chariot races. When you're there, they show you the what's essentially the floor of the Colosseum is this sort of maze of rooms. That wasn't viewable to the public. There was a sort of floor above that. These were the below where the gladiators lived and slept, but they had mechanisms to flood the Colosseum, and they would have full-sized ship-to-ship combat battles in the Colosseum for, not like miniatures, but they would they'd flood it, bring full-sized ships in, and those two full-sized ships would conduct war games for everybody watching in the Colosseum. And when they were done, they had the mechanisms to then sluice the water back out. It goes away, then everybody can have their homes back that are living underneath. But that level of sort of rich leisure time was so much more sort of, not evolved is not the word I'm looking for, but so much more complicated and technological than really we give them credit for.
Yeah, what if we flooded Arlington every time we wanted to have ships in the state?
Take the Death Star and flood it in the middle of it and bring out the SS Alabama. And we're going to reenact Pearl Harbor, because that's kind of what they were doing. It would have been like, we're going to reenact Pearl Harbor for you in middle of Cowboy Stadium.
Wow.
Nowadays, we're just like, well, let's move this wooden flooring out of the way and have ice.
Yeah. Well, nowadays, people are just like, I have ship-to-ship combat in my online MMO multiplayer world of warships.
I think it's interesting that with the coming of Christianity into the Roman world, and the introduction of humility and not praising anything other than the Christian God and the Christian names. The idea that here in the United States we have such a large population of Christian believers who, and a lot of them think that this is a Christian nation and all that, but we name everything after people that we, give
Hold in
importance
reverence.
to. That we,
Yeah.
and in family names, and so we kind of have a semblance of Roman.
Oh, if you look at America, really almost worldwide, but certainly America 2016 looks remarkably like the declining years, for lack of a better description, of the Roman Empire, because of, and it goes to, I don't know necessarily getting too far off topic, because it goes to how they spent their leisure time and how we spend our leisure time. They suddenly had a lot more of it, and they had so much more of it that they realized they didn't need to fight their wars. They could hire mercenaries to do. So they would hire, Gauls and Picts and Celts to fight their wars for them, until the Gauls and Picts and Celts went, we're doing all your fighting for you. You really couldn't stop us if we decided we wanted Rome, and turned around and decided they wanted Rome. And it's kind of the same way. As leisure has evolved, I think it's just a natural progression. People tend to be more protective or possessive of their leisure activity and their leisure time. I'm sorry, go ahead, Andrew. You look like you had something.
Yeah, I was going to say, another thing that I found is the more advanced these societies were, the more likely they were to have these like specified leisure time or like sports or something like that. The other thing I found was like, and it still happens today, it's documented today, is that indigenous cultures and cultures that haven't been as like technologically advanced, they find leisure in the work that they do. They blur, the lines blur between, the things we have to do this day and, going out and hunting or something like that. They make that their leisure time. And you can see that now and today with someone who has to work, 40 plus hours. They kind of find fun in their work. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Robbie. What did you?
Oh no, I was just going to say that I think one of the reasons that we can view the Romans culture as one of the first examples of where we can see the product of leisure time. A real respect for art and for music and for so-called non-productive output, is because they were acting as a society, because the opportunity for leisure time grows with the number of people who are coordinating together. Because if you look at one person trying to sustain themselves, they're going to have very little free time, because most of their time is going to be focused on making sure that they're fed. And to Andrew's point, there are still indigenous cultures in the world who have to spend most of their waking hours just ensuring that they and their immediate family and tribe are provided for just nutritionally, never mind anything beyond just staying fed, and
pure hunter gatherer.
Yeah. When feeding yourself is more opportunistic as opposed to something that you can really plan around. I mean, the reason that we that the Romans and cultures like that were able to advance was advances in agriculture and being able to silo food so that you could be provided for months ahead of time, not just the immediate moment. And that provides the opportunity for, okay, well, this person doesn't have to spend so much time toiling in the field or whatever, and can pursue something that isn't meeting some immediate need. And I think it's specifically those advancements are the reason why we can even talk about this idea of leisure time. That something like that is
it evolved with civilization.
Yeah. I think those cultures that Andrew is talking about almost don't even necessarily understand the idea, because they're still in a place where they have to spend so much effort just making sure that their immediate needs are met to prevent death, let alone any kind of like fulfillment or enjoyment.
And like he was talking about, like Andrew was talking about the Olympics. I mean, the early Olympics, what are the earliest sort of sports were the things that man did anyway. He ran, he jumped, and depending on how you chose to look at it, fought or wrestled, or, those were baser activities that they turned into competition for leisure. What's up?
Yeah, that's something I've thought about is competitiveness almost seems ingrained in humans as a whole, because if you look on one side of the world, you have ancient Greece, ancient Rome, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, and then the other side of the world you have the Mayans, Incas, and Aztecs who played games like the Tlachtli, which was like 1500 BC, the game where you use a giant rubber ball and try to use anything but your hands to put it through a stone hole in a wall, and which led to sacrifice.
Soccer.
Yeah, as it would. Yeah, and I think that competition that's, for lack of a better phrase, I suppose that's Darwinism at work. I mean, that's it's a genetic code that says fittest survive.
And is it built into every human being? Maybe Vicky, you could answer this. Do you feel that women are as competitive as men?
Yeah. I think so.
In some cases, I would imagine more so.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I don't know about more so, but I think, you want...
Competitiveness isn't just...
I don't think it's gender specific.
Yeah, I don't think it's genetically... It's as Homo sapien has it in its genetic makeup.
I think maybe in like society terms, there's things that men are competitive about and things that are women, and things that women aren't competitive about. But I don't think it's genetic. I think that's more societal.
Yeah, I think the early, like the fact that women's sports evolved relatively late in Western culture certainly has less to do with the desire and more to do with the opportunity. Yeah. That just wasn't something a proper woman did.
Yeah, we just got pregnant and made food.
Yeah, it's sad to say, but it's absolutely true. That's about, you were essentially a broodmare for the state up until a certain point. Women were traditionally seen to only be, a vessel for which the next generation of males was to come.
Right, and when women started competing for what were, for a while, men's jobs, the world of social rights and equal gender rights kind of took off.
Yeah, I think the wars probably in that case, certainly in the United States, World War II and the sudden absence of a male workforce and the willingness and capability of the female workforce to continue doing those jobs really made it harder when the war was over for the men to come back and go, women can't do that job anymore, because they could go, really? Because I just spent 4 damn years making those bullets you were flinging around in Western Europe.
Yeah,
it's something that's odd that a lot of the research that I looked for, or that I found while looking up this topic, did not specify, divisions in gender or anything like that. Although there are probably really strong divisions, and there are probably bold lines where you could draw where women were able to actually express themselves in those ways, or just enjoy themselves in those ways. I don't know what I'm trying to say here.
Well, yeah, I think just to go back to the idea of the more people working in concert together, the more opportunity there would be for non-productive activity. I think that women got pigeonholed into that role of you're responsible for raising the children and whatever other menial, quote unquote menial tasks might be at hand, and leave the more important work for the men. And as long as we're all doing our job, as long as everybody's pulling together, then we'll achieve whatever our immediate need is, and have the opportunity for these enriching activities. Now, whether or not they got to participate in them as much as they should have, obviously is plain to see and in history. And
I feel on a certain level, I feel like maybe they were forced to funnel that competitiveness into the avenues they were allowed, which is sad to say, is stuff like bake-offs and quilting. You know what I mean?
Beauty
Like that was
competitions.
the only field of competition available to them was baking competitions, the things that the women's work competition, air quote on air quote. It's definitely a virtuous thing that more and more as we evolve, that idea is more and more archaic and more just sounds ridiculous.
It's becoming more balanced.
Oh, absolutely.
We have just as many female gamers as male gamers, and hopefully a rise.
You do
I see a rise in. I mean, this is getting into the workforce, but and creative. The creative workforce is women directors.
Oh yeah,
making incredible movies and finally being applauded for their work, and it really means something to balance that out.
Yeah, Vicky, what
I
were you
think
going to say?
while the lines are starting to blur and more women, I should say, are doing more things or fitting into different roles, I think there's still a long way to go. I mean, I think there's still a lot of women or girl gamers out there who still get questioned about their leisure activities because they're women. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think the few female, when I hear women gamers, my brain immediately goes to the video gaming.
That's what I mean.
And I it's better than it was in the late 90s, early 2000s. But I imagine that women gamers still, if they're going to play online, have to deal with a lot of this sort of social Cro-Magnon.
Even men have to deal with.
I'm almost more sexual harassment is more kind of what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, but I don't think that's restricted to gaming either. I think that's just a consequence of being a woman online, being faced with a bunch of piggish people who know that there's no consequence to whatever actions they're about to partake in, whatever insults they want to hurl that way, because there's no accountability online.
Yeah.
Going back to the leisure activities, I think I've spoken to Andrew about this before. If you, I still get it. If I have something that I like to do, they'll ask me, "Oh, is that what Andrew likes? Is that why you like it?" I still get that.
Yeah, I could see that.
I don't understand why you are asking me this.
Idea
that I can't enjoy any.
Right.
Yeah, you can't have your own interests.
Yeah.
When you're in a relationship, your interests are flaked off of your spouse.
Yeah. I'm sure he doesn't get it as often. People aren't "Oh, I bet you like that show because your wife watches it."
Well,
No.
if it fits the gender norm,
the stereotype.
Yeah, we're still trying to break those stereotypes and those norms. I've been watching RuPaul's Drag Race with my wife, and our son enjoys it too. And
I had a coworker for the longest time that she would. She was like, "No, you need to watch this. I know what you're thinking, but it's really good television.
It's a fantastic show."
Yeah, that's all I've ever heard is good things about that. And I just don't have access to it to give it a try.
You've already talked about how much you love Keeping Up with the Kardashians. So.
Yeah. The Kardashian
Jeremy
thing
just
was
has
well
it
documented in an
tuned into
earlier
Bravo
episode.
24/7.
Well, you know what? It's better than what used to be the Learning Channel. That's last time I watched, saw the schedule for the Learning Channel. I'm like, wow, there is nothing educational left on that channel.
Yeah, TLC is closer to T-Baw's Left Eye and Chili than the Learning Channel.
That's really sad to say, but that is absolutely true.
I don't know, man. They have some pretty crazy episodes on there.
It's New Jersey hairstylists gone wild. But no, in talking about the sort of as leisure time became less just an upper 1% kind of activity and more of a working class, I think we sort of tracked that to maybe the Industrial Revolution when workers first started forming labor unions and sort of demanding and getting from factory owners and company owners and manufacturing owners the right to have 2 days off or 1 day off, an 8-hour work day, so that then they began to sort of have leisure time of their own and find their own ways to spend it, which weren't always the same ways that the rich were spending their leisure time. Like they sort of created their own leisure time activities. Soccer/football would be is a huge example of that. I was saying earlier, the Premier League teams, but almost, I don't know that I would say every, because someone from England would actually fly over here and beat me with a shovel for being wrong about this. But a lot of the big Premier League teams have 100-plus-year-old history, and they started, like Manchester United, started as a team formed by railroad workers, LNER, LNYR, I can't remember which, but they just formed their own team, and they played other railroad worker teams, which later became things like Arsenal, and so I think there was a lot of that sort of stuff. Andrew, did you look like you maybe had something?
Oh, no. To kind of tie into what you were just saying, I was going to say they used their leisure time, a lot of those people that were getting out of work earlier than they were used to, by going to bars, shooting darts, and eventually going to those matches that you were talking about.
And those matches became a job for other people's leisure time to be spent watching.
What did trying to remember? I just finished this weekend watching what's considered one of the oldest soccer rivalries in world football, which is Glasgow Rangers versus Glasgow Celtic. And for years it's called the Old Firm, but it's called that because in its earliest inception, some close to 100 years ago, they were these two teams that formed that seemed to always win and generate the most attendance. And so they were called the Firm because they, almost in a mocking way, because they were making it into a business. It was starting to be their job to be Glasgow Rangers football players and Glasgow Celtic football players. There was a lot of that where you can see where it starts to become, suddenly people realize other people will pay to watch me because I'm good at this particular leisure activity. Darts is sort of, as it is here, is huge money business on the Isle of Britain.
Poker,
snooker, poker. I mean, we there's millions of dollars and millions of viewers watching celebrity poker, watching the World Series of poker, and we're watching people play a card game. ESPN2 used to broadcast Magic the Gathering tournaments. There's people getting paid to play video games. I mean, and paid good to play video games. That's an interesting evolution when
sponsorship,
when leisure becomes your job because you're so good at it. Other people want to watch you do your leisure activity. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to sort of talk about both what we do with our leisure time and a kind of where leisure is in this day and age. And also later we're going to discuss a little bit about where it might be headed in the future. So do stick around with us. We'll be right back in just a moment.
Time. Leisure time. Did you ever stop to think how much leisure time you really have? Some of us put our leisure time to good use. And some of us...
And welcome back to Revolving Culture. This week we are talking about the evolution of leisure. Earlier we were talking sort of about the history of leisure and how it has evolved up through the Industrial Revolution. Really, I think at this point we might start with what might be considered the starting point of the modern leisure activity, which would have been the theater initially. The movie stars pre-Civil War were the were the play actors. John Wilkes Booth was the Tom Cruise of his day because he was a Shakespearean actor and had acted in the theater. Could get anywhere he wanted to get, including right next to Abraham Lincoln, because he was John Wilkes Booth, the theater actor. People packed in theaters watching plays, Shakespearean era. It started the, Robbie, you mentioned this earlier. It starts the sort of passive leisure activity, the leisure activity available to everybody, regardless of athletic ability, skill set, age, health. Everyone can sit and watch a story. And even in Shakespearean times, both the Globe Theatre in London had seats for the wealthy up close, but they also had sort of bench seating for the people that didn't have as much money, and they could still come and see The Merchant of Venice or anything else that Shakespeare might have written that escapes me at this point because my brain's just turned into potato salad. Andrew, you had something on when sort of play evolved into film.
Let's see. The first public screenings of films that admission was charged in was 1895 by an American, Woodville Latham, and his sons. These films that they produced. What I did kind of want to touch on was the arts themselves,
mm-hmm.
and how they kind of were a product of like the Enlightenment and people looking more within themselves as opposed to being like competitive, which is a big change because up to this point we were talking about sport and physical exertion as a way of showing competitiveness or showing like your dominance of yourself, of your person, and up to the point of the Enlightenment, which was what, the 1600s?
I think give or take.
So the 17th century. We hadn't really looked within our own psyches. At that point, it had all been
right.
Physical
catharsis.
Exactly.
You were exercising the competitive side of your brain,
and because I guess to that point, religion had played such a big part in people's understanding of themselves. You could look to this doctrine, and that was all you needed to know about yourself. But with the Enlightenment, there was an inner development, and with that came expression through the arts, through music, through
personal mediums.
Yes, theater, poetry.
Yeah. All activities that increasingly sort of held up a mirror to that particular time and place, society in that time and place. I mean, especially back then, plays and the poetry weren't really the equivalent of what we would call going to see Star Wars. These were reflecting back the society that they were living in right back at them. And so I think that speaks to what you were talking about, in that it was suddenly now we were becoming more introspective with our leisure and more philosophical with it than perhaps we had been previously.
Yeah, that's a really good use of vocabulary to sum it up.
Sorry.
No, you're really good. That was perfect. But what I was trying to get to is we were talking about how in the modern age it's more of a passive. We have more passive mediums. We still have those physical displays, but I guess it's without. We don't overlook. I guess we're not trying to overlook the fact that I don't think it's fair to say it's passive, like that the mediums are passive, because even back then we were still as viewers, as the audience, spectators, which is passive in itself. It's just that the way that it evolved, it was the act in itself seems more passive, even though it's just as exerting or taxing, just on a different spectrum than what
that's fair to say. It's not completely passive. If you're depending on the style of the entertainment at hand, it might expect a more engaged presence of you, to just kind of create an analogy for the modern day. That some films are referred to as popcorn films, and the idea there is that you can more or less tune out and not really miss out on anything, compared to a more auteur style film, which is really has a philosophical message that it wants to convey, and
the quote unquote sophistication level of that particular
with or without the pretension, but it does require a more, like, nobody could accuse Terry Gilliam, for instance, of making a passive movie viewing experience, compared to the Jerry Bruckheimers and the Michael Bays of the world, who are more than happy to give you a perfectly passive experience, and there's no shame in that. That is
it's necessary.
They each serve their own
I would
purpose.
Suggest, constant introspection and philosophy is almost, more harm than good, because then you become too centered on self, and your worldview gets bleaker and bleaker the more you kind of internalize everything. Everyone needs that moment of watching the dog micturate upon the transforming robot. There's certainly a huge value in just watching big shit explode and cheering.
Yeah, I think since we're talking specifically about storytelling, and the whole idea of our podcast is to discuss the evolution of something, I think it's interesting to look at to think about leisure time in the framework of storytelling and storytellers and their importance to different cultures over the course of time. And so when you think back to early man and tribalism and everything, there were storytellers, typically, the elders of the community, whose job it was to, convey, stories about, whatever gods were part of their particular pantheon, and try to convey, messages, with those stories to the younger people. And it was very important to those cultures to always make sure that there was at least one person whose responsibility it was to convey those stories on and on, because that was the only real form of record keeping they had, was just the spoken word, down
oral history
from generations. Yeah, oral history. And to see the importance that was placed, in those cultures on storytelling and so on and so forth into, we'll get back to the Greek and the Romans, where it takes on a more religious tone with them, because now we're talking about the stories of the gods, the people who govern over us, and we have to have a deep respect for it, because our actions, influence their behavior and their reactions to us.
It's interesting to note that ancient Roman, the pagan belief system, they didn't mind the sort of underground Christianity for the longest time. They didn't care that you didn't believe in the Roman gods. What they cared about was whether or not you participated in the rituals of belief in the Roman gods. They're essentially doesn't really bother us that you don't believe in the Roman gods, but you have to do the sacrifices. You have to attend the functions, because if you don't, the Roman gods might get upset and level our town. So we don't care that you don't believe in them, but you're still going to have to perform as though you believed in them, because they might still get pissed off if you don't.
Yeah, and I think that divide between, are the stories that we're talking about of a religious nature, or aren't they, conveys a certain amount of respect as we go forward in history, because now we're talking about plays and that kind of performance, that would eventually lead to film and television as we know it today. But the respect that you gained as a playwright or as a play actor was completely inverse to the kind of reverence that I was talking about.
Oh, absolutely.
With that, they were musicians and play actors and playwrights were seen by those societies as less than zero. You're and when I suppose that thinking was a result of like what's the product that you're providing us, and is anybody fed at the end of your play?
Yeah.
and so it was seen as, nowadays we have real reverence for Shakespeare and those early playwrights,
whoever
but
he may be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But at the time it was seen as completely disposable, and there really didn't command any respect in the way that it would today. Where nowadays, we have real respect for all filmmakers, and we can be critical of film, but it'd be a lie to say that the world doesn't place a high importance on film.
Yeah, I mean, in the Middle Ages, the people traveling performing plays were welcome into town, provided they made sure they were back out of town by sundown. Like, that was kind of like, yeah, great, come in, put on your show, please don't stay. because we don't need your type around here. That's great. That's cute thing you did. Please, next town's waiting for you. As long as you're out of here by sundown, that's really all we care about. And then in plays, kind of, sort of, we talked about the advent of movies, but as film was still kind of a rarity, or the films were short because film stock was hard to manufacture. The costs were high, so not as many people got to go to films. The advent of broadcast radio really sort of bridges a gap. That was bringing the sort of movie experience into the home, 12 hours a day. Suddenly now the family could gather after dinner around the radio set, and, for lack of a better way of wording it, the theater of the mind's eye. They hear the story, but their brain paints the picture. Your psyche is the director. You see these characters how you see them, not how a filmmaker nailed that character down. Sam Spade wasn't just Humphrey Bogart. Sam Spade was whoever he was in your head. So I think we're increasingly seeing, with this evolution, people providing their interpretation or their vision of something for the consumption of the masses. And I think that continues to evolve as we go from plays to radio, to film, to television, which is really where the sort of leisure time of when you could wheel the television into the dinner table in the 1950s, that suddenly is a huge deal, because now you can eat your dinner and watch Ralph Cramden, just because an image from Back to the Future is always in my head. But really, I think television is a huge, I want to say a huge stepping stone, because radio, like you said, is one thing. But man, once television gets into the household and becomes affordable enough that the lower middle class and soon the lower class is able to afford some form of television in the home, it really sort of launches, I would suggest the majority of leisure time suddenly becomes spent watching network television.
Yeah, and you see a lot of parallels to what was happening in the 1950s and early 1960s and today, where because of the advent of black and white television at that time, movie theaters started seeing their numbers go down.
Oh yeah,
that audience. What's the word?
Attendance.
Attendance was depressing, and that so they started trying to reinvent how they did things, which included bigger screens, the advent of 3D projection,
stereo sound,
which we see nowadays.
Panavision.
Now that Netflix and all the streaming services are out, you're starting to see the same type of pushback with the major theater companies.
Isn't it interesting that it always seems to be there becomes a norm? I mean, it's not. I guess it's not like it's a surprising thing, but this is what we're talking about. Something becomes the norm. Someone finds out how to do the norm just that much better, make the norm that much more accessible, and everyone behind starts struggling to either keep up, evolve, or go out of business. I mean, you go to, the Redbox essentially puts Blockbuster out of business. Netflix is a huge dent. Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, huge dent in what Redbox does. It just seems like anything else in life, anything else in society, someone's always going to find that next step.
I think it has more to do with the medium that you can transmit it under. So, when you compare television against radio and I'm sure there was, I don't have the research to back this up, but I can't imagine it wasn't the case that once television had proliferated, that, the radio programs that had preceded it, took a hit, and it's because there's now a technology present to convey these ideas that is more appealing. And when you compare, the idea of well, if I want to watch, a film, I have to have a cable subscription and subscribe to HBO or something like that. Or, here comes this new transmission medium, where I can and subscribe to Netflix and have these same films, through my phone, which,
right,
for a greatly reduced cost, that's far more appealing. And
what's funny is a lot of the radio shows just moved to television. Jack Benny, Amos and Andy, all of those shows. Jack Benny moves to television, and suddenly you put a face to the exact same voices that you heard on the radio. Suddenly you saw Jack Benny, and you saw Rochester, and you saw, it's that was, you either joined the revolution or you got lost in the undertow.
Yeah. And in the case of The Shadow, it moved to the theater.
That's right.
And
it became
70
Alec
years
Baldwin.
after anybody wanted it. Well, 50 years after anybody wanted it.
The Phantom with Billy Zane was kind
It's
of
an
the
awful
same
movie.
way. I mean,
What? The Shadow's awful.
Yeah, it's bad. It's a bad
yeah,
movie.
I'm gonna back that play.
It's
Shadow's
not
bad.
It's not.
When's the last time you watched it?
Probably 15.
I don't think I've
is
ever
it War
seen
and
it.
Peace or
Never seen it?
Casablanca? No, but I'm with Jeremy. It was a
good
serviceable
movie.
summer blockbuster popcorn movie.
Was
good.
Jennifer Connelly in it?
No, you're thinking of the Rocketeer, I think.
Oh.
Rocket.
Oh, there's a blonde. The blonde was in The Shadow. Just some blonde.
Just
some
some
yellow-haired
blonde.
woman.
broad.
Was it Kim Basinger maybe, because she and Alec Baldwin would have been.
No, I
All
don't
right,
think.
where do you
I don't think they
stand-
could afford.
Where do you stand on Dick Tracy?
It's better. It's better than The
I
Shadow.
think the Shadow's better.
No, yeah.
They're both not that
Dick
great.
Tracy's pretty good. Though.
Hey, look at this
I was-
alley! Look at this alley we've just turned down.
I was Dick Tracy for Halloween.
Sadly enough, so was I.
Wait,
Probably the
when
same
were you?
year.
Probably, yeah. I had the yellow trench coat. I spent like $40 doing that.
When were you Dick Tracy for Halloween?
When I was I don't know, second grade or something. I would
Jesus,
say.
Were you
that's
around
sad, 'cause
10?
That would have been 92, 91, 92.
Yeah.
I was that for after high school.
I was
Halloween party.
a demon Indiana Jones. I had a leather jacket and a Indiana
awesome.
Jones hat and a demon mask.
It's clever.
nice.
My brother was the Crow, and everyone thought he was Edward Scissorhands. And he was. We were both Batman one year, and he was like the old blue and gray Batman, and I was the black cool.
He was Adam West, and you were
You were
Michael Keaton.
Everyone was like, "Hey, it's Batman and Batgirl." Because our brother had long curls coming out of the back of his
That's sad.
smock.
And man tits. No, that's
Yeah. So where were we?
I also got to admit, boys have much cooler costume than girls.
Yes.
well, yeah.
I was basically like a witch or an angel or like a clown.
Until
Some
said
lame-ass
girl costumes
shit.
are for girls over 18,
Yeah.
and then that becomes just
Yeah, then it becomes sexy fill in the blank.
Yeah, slash unslash.
Hear more about
upsetting.
our Halloween costumes in the next 3 episodes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, as we're kind of reaching a good point where maybe we're getting into where leisure is headed. So this might be as good a time as any. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll look at kind of where leisure activities might be going in the future. Stick around with us. We will be right back. You're listening to Revolving Culture. Welcome back to Revolving Culture. We are talking about the evolution of leisure, and we've kind of talked about the history, and we've sort of talked about how it's evolved, especially here in the last maybe year to year and a half. I think we can see a pretty direct representation of where leisure time activity is probably heading. I think as we're seeing the VR headsets finally kind of realizing the promise, maybe, because we've talked, VR has been a thing people have talked about for 20 years, but we're finally starting to see the actual, they're physically meeting what everyone was expecting them to be, and I think that's only going to progress from here. Do we think that really with the advent of VR, leisure is going to start becoming even more internalized, because now with a pair of motion controllers and a $300 visor, you can do anything. You can experience any kind of activity without ever getting off your couch.
Yeah. First, it really has to capture the gaming audience.
Yep.
And right now we're seeing that with, Google tried to do it with augmented reality with the Google Glass. It didn't quite take off. But funny enough, it took off with Pokemon Go.
Yep.
And the augmented reality features of that game. So
and Microsoft now too. Their augmented reality.
Oh, really?
Goggles. Yeah, I think the thing that they're testing or they're starting to bring to market is sort of, well, let's show Google what they were trying to do, and here's how to really do it. And there's been a lot in the last week. I've started to see a lot of demo footage coming out of Microsoft's augmented reality.
Now, I don't know
glasses.
much about VR, but how easy is it for like any person to use? Like somebody who has no experience with gaming.
Increasingly, it's extremely easy. Can you hold 2 little baton controllers and wear a pair of goggles?
Right.
That's it.
It's like you're if you're playing a game or just some sort of real world simulation, your movements are on a 1-to-1 ratio. So you're not having to translate what you want to do from your brain to your fingers into buttons and joystick. You're actually moving. Your movements are translated into the game or whatever the virtual reality is. So
the experience, whatever.
Yeah, whatever the experience is. So it's a much more natural translation.
So because it is easy, and is it pretty attainable?
Oh yeah, I mean it's still a little pricey, but you know what was
still pricey, yeah.
What was 10 years or even 2 years ago, what would have been $1,000 technology is $200 technology now. So I mean, I think we're rapidly getting to the point again, like all of these things we've talked about did. Once it evolves to the point where it is accessible to more than just the upper 1%. Then's when it becomes a paradigm shift in the sort of the leisure culture, and I think we're maybe a year away from Robbie. You made the decision of the world becoming a ghost town because internet porn now becomes VR porn.
Yeah, I mean, I was saying that. In
Well,
jest,
yeah, it's tongue in
obviously,
cheek, but
like I think it's more reflective of. I think that right now, obviously, the appeal of VR is to gamers because those are the platforms that it's been that it's finding a foothold, and I think that what will really it's the same way that games were once a very niche thing for a very small segment of the population. And it's, since we're talking about leisure activity, when people think of video gaming, they probably think of people playing Xboxes and PlayStations, but that's not really the picture of games anymore, and hasn't been for a while now. If you really want to talk about what most people, if you want to define the largest sample size of people who are playing video games, it's people playing mobile games or playing Facebook games, and the age that is engaging in those, the heaviest are skewed towards the older people. And so I think that the point where you would see the kind of tipping point for VR or something like that is when there can be an experience that will approximate a social experience through VR, like the equivalent of like going to the bar and hanging out, or having a family function through VR where you're seeing the other people that you know in a shared space through the VR. Because I think most leisure time, I think most leisure time is about being with other people. There's always going to be a segment of the population that wants to be by themselves, but we're social creatures. We always will be, and the options to us when we have leisure time usually involve being social, even if it's remotely social, like playing online games together. And that's basically, I'm talking about the equivalent of like what would be Facebook,
right?
Not necessarily a game element to it, but just a socializing and interaction element to it.
Ready Player One. A story that deals heavily in what we're kind of positing to be the future of VR. One of the aspects of that became sort of like VR interactive movie. Like you within the confines of that virtual reality, you reenacted your favorite. You were you and your friends were the characters in Monty Python's Holy Grail, or in the Goonies, or in Back to the Future, or and I'm just throwing out 80s stuff because that's what that book was all about. But at the point where virtual reality becomes that it's not just for gaming, but it is you and your friends get together and reenact a movie, or hit the virtual bar, or again in that book, go to virtual school. Like you attend your high school, you attend your classes in a virtual reality setting instead of a physical classroom. Is that kind of where we think it's heading? Jeremy, what did you?
I was thinking a lot of people like to spend the money that they earned while they're working and the time that they have when they're not gambling. So if we take that into the realm of virtual reality, we already have gambling games.
Right.
And we already have loads of games that you put money into to get reward from. If you take the virtual reality experience and make it a gambling experience that you just pump dollars into for, money, reward, that could be the downfall of humanity as well.
Well, do we think that maybe the gap between, because there will always be the people who spend their leisure time camping, do we think that there'll be a point where that gap between the people that are still going out camping, still going out horseback riding, still going hiking, still doing that, and the people that are staying inside with the VR headset on to, trying to be somebody else? They want to be Tom Cruise, or they want to be, this movie star, or they want to be that comic book character. Do you think that gap is going to get wider between those two segments of the population?
I don't think it's quite so segmented like that. I don't think there's going to be very many examples of people who are completely Luddite and away from the technology, and there are people who are ready to put themselves into it.
Right. You think it's
24/7. I think that most people will be moderates and will have will enjoy. I'm certain they'll have a preference for one or the other, but it won't be so absolute. There will be outliers. There always are.
Well, yeah.
But
did you think I said camping or gambling? Because I said gambling.
Yeah, you said gambling.
Oh, okay. You said camping, and I was like, wait, did he think I said
I was just talking about the sorry.
No, it's okay. I thought you heard me as camping, so I was like, all right.
No, I'm just a tool.
Well, Marty's just bringing up the point about
people.
Is there going to be a reverence or a disrespect for nature as this kind of technology proliferates, and
is it going to cause a divide between factions of people who are super hyper?
Yeah, that's more or less. I was just curious because we are social creatures, but we do also have a tendency to draw lines in the sand, and it becomes us against them.
People are so varied that I don't think there's going to be us and them ever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I shouldn't say ever.
Yeah.
I don't think in any time in the foreseeable future.
One thing that Robbie was saying about how people are social creatures and how we haven't really found a way to make our interactions online feel completely natural, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I don't feel supernatural. I don't feel supernatural at all. I'm not a vampire or werewolf.
No, that anybody can prove.
But I don't feel comfortable the way I do just sitting here with you guys talking to each other. But even on Skype, I felt awkward sitting there, seeing you guys through a video feed, and then seeing myself was even worse.
Yeah.
But the thought I was coming up with was we put a video on the website when we had the arcade episode that shows a VR arcade.
Oh yeah,
yeah, the virtual
cool.
reality arcade.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a little off-putting because there's no one else in there.
Yeah,
right.
There's not it's not smoky.
An abandoned arcade.
although we say
Just
that,
you and
but
the arcade.
we still view Facebook likes or Instagram likes.
It's a social experience.
As this person notices what I'm doing.
Right.
That being
But
said,
that's not necessarily the case, we still consider those social interactions when they're not.
The evolution of how people interact in a leisurely manner. There was a time when leisure time was about community. It was about let's go bowling. Let's have a sports league. Let's do any number of things that involve us actually being face to face. And like we were saying earlier about how the technologies, that have changed over time that permit us different, allowances for doing things. I guess that's why I think that that online interactions are going to be, already are where a lot of people spend their leisure time. I'm totally guilty of mindlessly flipping through Facebook, even while my wife does exactly the same thing, and we're sitting on the couch together. We could be having a conversation with one another, but and there's arguments to be made of is that useful time? Should we be striving more for face to face interactions with our leisure time, and have we lost something with
the question becomes, is it hampering progress or is it just progress?
We won't know really until we're on the other side of it.
Does this kind of technology isolate us more than it does make us part of what we want to call a community?
Maybe because I'm coming from the sort of immediate generation preceding most everyone at this table. That's how I see it, because I lived in a different time with a different sort of set of interactions. So it feels to me like everything's becoming more when in fact, like I said, we can't decide. We can't really say at this point if it's just progress that's going to happen regardless, or if we're hampering progress. And that's one of those things, like Vicky said, unfortunately, we're not going to know till we're on the other side of it, good or bad or indifferent.
Yeah.
One thing, like, we can cut what I'm about to say, but on your point of, like, I don't know if you feel the same way that I do about texting and communicating with somebody through text, but, like, I only send text to people whenever, like, not necessarily that I need something from them, but, like...
It's okay to say that. I mean, I think that a lot of people do that.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I need to communicate something to somebody, but not whenever I'm just dropping in to say, like, I just want to know how somebody's doing. I'll call somebody every time that I want to know how they're doing. I'll call you just to see what's up or something like that, or see what you're doing to see if you want to hang out or something like that. I won't.
Masturbating or pooping.
Yeah.
Come back later, but
weird, because I'm doing the same thing.
Now we know how Jeremy spends his leisure time.
I gotta admit,
there's no shame in that, sir.
I do that all the time. Like, hey, what have you been up to? Haven't seen you in a while. Cool, thanks for catching up.
See, like,
I
don't really. Well,
I do
with
that.
you. I make a point to, like, say, how are things going, and love you and stuff like that.
Me?
But yeah,
I would hope so.
I do. There's probably proof.
Going, my wife. Who are you?
But, like, my mom or my brother or something like that, I don't ever really text them to say. Well, every so often I'll be like, if I haven't heard from them at all and I don't have the time to call or something,
I'm terrible about calling people. I really should call people more.
It's one of those things. We can speculate all we would like, but I think that in the final analysis, until we're there on that next plateau, it's just impossible to say, where this is going to evolve.
Yeah.
If this is going to be just a lot of Sturm und Drang, and we find ourselves really no different than we were before, or if we turn a major sociological corner and the world of 20 years from now doesn't look anything like the world of 2016.
It looks like the Matrix.
Yeah.
The Matrix.
There's times when I would gladly take the plug into the base of my skull.
I think we're going to have to wait for the generation that's right underneath us to come into power and start going into the workforce to really
Maybe
see...
another 30, 40 years.
Yeah, to really see the effects of, like, what all this was. Because those people, I mean...
Well, I think they're
or that generation.
Just by the nature of the environment that they're in, where they've never known a world without it.
Yeah.
That those kinds of interactions will have their own intimacy and their own exactly, their own relevance to them. Just because that's the nature of those interactions.
They developed with those interactions.
And the way we feel about
before those interactions.
The way we feel about a Facebook like is not.
Yeah, the first time that somebody might tell them something, really personable and really personal and really intimate, might be via text or email or what have you, instead of face to face, and that will create its own relevance and that special feeling for them. But I don't know, we're like way off of off of evolution of leisure here. But
Robbie brought up a good point earlier in the week. We were talking about God knows what, but he was talking about how we live in the confluence of like, we're the last generation that's going to, how did you put it, like
we're the last generation that knows how things were before social media, and having things like cell phones, where if you want to get a hold of somebody, or if you want to tell them something, they're moments away from you, if they take the call or if they read your text, and it's just like Vicky said, we're kind of in we're in unfounded territory right now, where we don't know what the long-term effects of living like that is going to be on people, and how they interact with one another, and what the consequences are of living in that conflux of constant information and constant feedback on what you're doing with who, and I just think I'm really glad to be who I am, because I get to be part of that. I get to see the transition from the world before and the world after.
Yeah, see, your generation with social media is my generation with the internet and cable television.
Exactly.
I mean, it's the famine to feast.
Yeah.
There was nothing. There was 4 channels. There's
what about
every television show imaginable I can find online.
What about chat rooms?
Yeah, the evolution of chat rooms became the chat room moved to your phone.
Yeah.
I look at my niece. Her idea of leisure time was sitting and by herself, either in her room or on the couch, and just watching like YouTube Let's Play videos for hours on end, and just not being bothered. Like, she'd like to put headphones on and just zone out. And
and it's a certain kind of voyeurism, and on the surface it's really easy as an older person or somebody outside of that culture to look at that and be dismissive of it, and say, well, what's the point of doing that? Why, that's something that you could be doing yourself. Let's assume they're watching Minecraft or something like that. It's like, you could just as easily be, I was right, wasn't I? Yeah, I knew it. I knew I was right. It's one side could say like, well, you could just as soon be doing that, but it's really no different than anybody else watching TV or watching a sporting event. It's you're reveling in that person's activity, and it's its own kind of interaction, whether the person who's broadcasting that knows that this specific person in this specific place is getting some fulfillment out of it. That part isn't important. It's
no one's a spectator by force. You're a spectator for the things you want to spectate.
Except in North Korea or
that's right.
There's probably some football widows who've been dragged to sporting events that would probably argue that point with me as well.
So I think that where I would hope that and who knows how long this would take, or whether or not humanity would survive to see it, but where I would like to see leisure time arrive at is as I mentioned earlier, the whole reason that leisure time even exists is because we were able to take something that was scarce, whether it was food or shelter or some other basic need, and find a surplus of it, which afforded us time to focus on other things. If we could ever get to a place where we are post scarcity, for everything, I think that's when we could truly be enlightened people, because it would we've talked amongst ourselves about eventually doing an episode about transhumanism or posthumanism, and I think that would be the end game, is what does the world look like where everyone is fed and taken care of, and obviously there will have to be a portion of the population that's making sure that whatever systems are providing that kind of fulfillment keep going, but that'll free up that many more people to pursue art and expression and think more about philosophy and what it means to be human.
The
and
second age of enlightenment.
Yeah. I think that leisure time is ultimately animals don't have leisure time. They don't have time to, they can't think the way that we do. They spend, most of their time making sure that their immediate needs are met, and we're a step beyond that, and we're heading down that road. And I don't know. I hope that
I would argue that animals definitely have leisure time when they're not fighting to feed themselves or
House
water.
pets.
They're playing. They're
Yeah, as I say, there's
socializing.
the concept of
The
play in
resting.
the animal kingdom.
yeah, that's fair to say. I shouldn't phrase it like that, I guess.
Maybe I think
Insects.
house pets, like house animals,
Wild animals too.
Yeah,
You think
there's
so?
Yeah,
I mean, we don't,
yeah,
need,
that's-
we don't need to argue.
That's true. Yeah, we can cut that me saying that stuff about
no, that's fine because
animals at all, because
But I do want to go back to
It's simply not
what
true.
you were talking about. my wife and I we watched a TED talk about artificial intelligence, and we were both pretty much in agreement that artificial intelligence is not a bad thing if it wants to. If we can find a way that it can efficiently dominate our artificial intelligence combined with robotics can dominate our workforce and do a lot of tasks for us. Like you were saying, it frees up a lot of our time.
yeah, if we were to arrive at a place where we are post scarcity, it would be a result of that. I would think, is we've found a way to automate things
Or-
to
What would
fulfill our
people do
immediate
for
We would
careers
needs.
have to
and
come up
jobs?
with a completely different economic system.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I was gonna say. Yeah.
for the record, to our future robot overlords, I for one oppose the slavery of robots and artificial intelligence. I just want that out there. Come the revolution, I just want everyone to know. I don't know who these people are. I just made the mistake of hitching a ride. That's
Yeah, I mean, if you think of
Not me.
there's a lot of negativity surrounding socialism, and I think that I guess the world that I'm thinking of would be the ultimate expression of socialism, where we've made sure that everyone's needs are accounted for, and
It goes
everyone would then be free to pursue their own expressions and their own
Yeah.
interests
It goes-
at their leisure.
It goes back to our first episode of Utopia.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
thanks for
what
joining
what
us.
I'm talking about is definitely a
the
Utopian idea.
utopic vision of the world.
yeah.
What were you saying?
I was just going to say thanks for joining us for our last episode.
But yeah, we probably have gotten to a point. This probably as good a time as any to go ahead and wrap up this discussion. It's granted it's a topic that for which there weren't a dearth of sort of wacky humorous moments, but it was I think a topic that we approached with some dignity and managed to really take a good look at. Before we completely wrap this up, Andrew would like to. We had some errata that we wanted to address from the last episode.
Oh yeah, the guys at from another really good podcast, those movie guys. The podcast covers current films. They have recommendations that they give out. They cover everything being released, things coming to video.
Yeah.
Stuff, trailers that have just come out. But they had a couple of corrections for us. One, last week we talked about Adventures in Babysitting, and the Thor character that we mentioned was Vincent D'Onofrio. Was played by Vincent D'Onofrio, which I went and looked up, and it's hilarious to see.
Yeah.
A thin, muscular Vincent D'Onofrio with
With
long
long blonde hair.
hair. It's very strange. And also, Friday the 13th, Part 4 had the appearance of Corey Feldman.
Yeah.
And I didn't do the research to see what the third one was.
Yeah, definitely check those guys out. Their podcast is really good and well worth the listen. And we appreciate that they thought enough of us to listen and contribute, which is as
Call
good a
us on
time as
our
any to
crap.
point out that you probably have some opinions about what we talked about this week or in previous episodes, things we've probably gotten wrong. Please, by all means, let us know. Twitter and Instagram, we're at RevCult Podcast. You can jump on our Facebook at Revolving Culture Podcast. Of course, if you want to catch us, this podcast is available on iTunes. It's on Stitcher, Google Play. Please throw us some reviews on iTunes. Let us know, good or bad, what's going on. We'd love to get those great reviews. But if you feel like there's something that we could be doing better, by all means, let us know. We'd love to hear what you had to say. We do thank you for joining us this week on Revolving Culture. Certainly join us next time. We've got a lot more great episodes coming up. So I'm Marty.
I'm Robbie.
I'm Andrew.
I'm Jeremy.
And I'm Vicky.
And we hope you guys have a great week, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Have a good night.
Good night.
Night.
Bye.
So long, farewell.
Auf Wiedersehen. Goodbye.